This is a couple of vector graphics that I've just kind of worked on my own personal time. Because today we are focusing on vector images. We all voted on this sketch that I did for my poster for Project 3. So today I'm going to show you how to do vector masking, and we're going to kind of go back over all of the tools and when and maybe where to use them and whatever you feel comfortable with. I'm obviously tracing images. You don't have to do that. So just kind of diving back in, let's kind of overview some of the tools, again, for creating vectors. Pretty much from the pen to the shape, all of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, all 4 of these you'll be using when you're manipulating and creating vector graphics. Because you can't forget about your direct selection tool and your path selection tool. Those are really important for this as well. Your path selection tool is very, very, very similar to your move tool. Now, if it asks you to rasterize, that means it's going to be pixel and it's no longer vector. Let me see if I can get mine to pop up to do that. Sometimes if you want to take like an eraser tool, it'll bring it up just like this. It'll say the shape must be rasterized before proceeding. Do you want to rasterize the shape? If I say okay, you'll see that it even still tried to. It actually created a vector mask using my shape to try to not take away the vector. Some Photoshops might actually just completely rasterize it, and then it's no longer vector. So my rule of thumb always has been, if you're getting pop-ups in Photoshop, you're probably doing something wrong, right? It's trying to tell you, hey, this is not the way. I went ahead and uploaded some reference images in here to get started. I'm going to just start off here. This one's really, really basic, and we're going to start with tools that you should already be familiar with, like your basic shapes. And then I'm going to start adding in the pen tool when it comes to creating these like half circle shapes. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is like lock my concept. Because you've ever traced something and then like the paper underneath moves? It's kind of what I'm doing right now. I'm like locking my base paper, what I have it under. And I do have it set to the same parameters that you guys are using for your project, which would be 1280 by 1920. So moving on, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trace the Pokeball. Kind of going in layers. I actually look like I want to maybe get the black first. So I'm going to come here and get my ellipse tool. Click the center. Just by clicking the center, you can get this box. And sometimes I'll start with like a perfect circle. Make sure it's filled in with black. Now, if I can use the shape tool, it's a lot easier instead of just kind of using what's already available to me, instead of starting from scratch. So now I have the black circle, and I'm actually going to label it, because this is where a lot of your layer management stuff comes in, and thinking of layers and what needs to be on top of which, but then you start losing stuff. So I'm going to add black Pokeball. I'm going to hide that. And then I'm going to create this white circle. So now I've got these two kind of building up. So now I want to do the thin stroked circle here in the center. So I'm going to come back to my ellipse tool. So now I'm going to add the red. So this is where I'm going to come in with my pen tool and kind of start adding some curvatures around. So I'm going to come straight here to the pen tool. Now there's multiple different pen tools. There's freeform, curvature, and then there's the add a point, delete a point, convert a point tools, which I will be using as well to demonstrate those. But usually what I do, just to kind of get started off, I go straight for the pen tool. So I'm going to actually start at this corner right here. I'm going to hold shift to make sure I get a nice straight line, the next corner. And then less is more, right? If you start having a whole bunch of different points, if you're like, hey, Professor Davis, why is my graphic looking really kind of jagged? I'm going to look at it and I'm going to say, you've got a lot of points. Try to come back and use the least amount of points as possible, so then you won't get a lot of kind of jagged looking lines. So I'm actually going to go straight to the top of the point, click, and while holding, I'm going to drag, and I get my handles around my anchor point. So then if I come in and I create the point here, it now has made that nice curvature of the top by just using 3 points. So I'm going to hold shift and get a nice straight line. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. So about the same point, I'm going to click the top of the red, click, hold, and drag until that curve matches. I'm not holding shift for that. The shift is how you would get a nice straight line. And then that looks good right there. And then I can just come back to my main point, and I have the top of the Pokeball. I'm going to set my fill to red. I'm not going to add a stroke. I'm going to move it down a little bit. So I've already done this, right? And it matches the bottom part. So I can say red cookie. It actually matches the bottom part perfectly. So instead of completely doing this all over again, I'm just going to layer, duplicate layer. And I'm going to call it white. I'm going to double click, get my properties. I'm going to select a good white. I need edit, transform, flip vertical, and then just drag it right into place. So I'm not adding more work to myself, right? I'm using what I already have. It matched up. So now once everything is turned on, I'll turn off that base layer. I have a Pokeball. So now I can actually turn off the Pokeball. That's done. That part of the design is done using the different pen tools, shape tools, direct selections. So now we can move on to the main guy here. So workflow wise, there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm going to kind of, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to look and say, what do my layers need to be? It looks like I need to go yellow first. And then depending on where I want to work, if I want to work on the clothes or the hat, it looks like my next round of color will either be orange or black. If I go for the black on top of the yellow, it'll be all the ear tips, the tail tip, and then the shirt base, and then building layers on top of that. So I'm going to lock the Pikachu so I don't accidentally move it. And I'm going to go straight for my pen tool. And let's go for the Freeform Pen tool to kind of demo that. Keep in mind, I am working on a trackpad. Don't judge my tracing abilities based on this. But with the Freeform Pen tool, you will kind of be able to use it like a paintbrush. So actually, I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to go back to my pen tool, but I just wanted to demo the Freeform Pen tool to kind of show you what is available to you. As you can see, I probably would prefer it around the fingers. It would make it a lot more pleasing instead of kind of the frustrating pen tool, but I'm going to go right for my pen tool, and I'm going to start right here. The original pen tool, I'm going to start right here at the corner of the ear, click. And as I click this next point, I'm going to drag so I can get that curvature of the ear. Now, because these handles are really dramatic, I'm going to want to maybe move it in to be able to make that turn. So I'm actually going to click Option or Alt and bring in that one handle so that when I go to create my next point, it's not jumping off and I'm not having to come back and fix it. So I'm actually going to come here and here. Just keep in mind those black tips are going to cover part of your yellow. So it's okay if you don't maybe extend it all the way out. So we're going to turn everything back on and kind of see where we're at. So it's kind of coming together slowly but surely. All right. So I'm going to now come back in and add the, it looks like black needs to be our next colors here. Awesome. So let's turn off our reference, kind of see what we're at. So now this is kind of where we are with creating the Pikachu. Kind of combination of using the pen tool and the shape tool, and manipulate it using your direct selection and your move tool. So you can also see here where I use the shape to define the arm without actually creating the arm as well. So now we're going to go for the shirts. And we have a Pikachu. Yay, Pikachu. All right, so I'm actually going to group all of those groups together in a group and call it Pika. So now I've got the Pokeball and the Pikachu. So what I'm going to do now is try to kind of get these placed similar to how I have them in my concept. So I've got my Pikachu about right here. And then I've got my Pokeball. Kind of comes about right here. I might extend it a little bit more. All right. I'm going to actually group both of those together, the Pika and Pokeball, Pika Pokeball, and call it vector. So now I'm going to show you guys how to do a vector mask because I need to kind of mask out this shape here, these lightning bolt shapes. So to do that, pretty much what I just did is I closed off those two groups so I can see. With the vector group selected, because remember you can apply a mask to a group, I'm going to come up and go to Layer, Vector Mask, Reveal All, and it creates the little mask icon next to it. What I'm going to want to do now is go to Paths. See Layers, Channels, Paths. I'm going to want to go to Paths. With the Vector Mask, because I have my group named as Vector. So Vector Mask, make sure that's selected. You're going to go to your pen tool. Now, this is really important if you do this to pay attention to how this kind of goes. You want to set it to path. So if you're going to go back and start working and you're like, hey, it's not creating shapes, it's because you have to set this back to shape. So I'm going to set it to path, make sure that this is selected, and I'm going to just start tracing the lightning bolt with my pen tool. So I have one lightning bolt, and I'm going to come down here and get the other one. All right, great. So I'm going to go ahead and move mine back to shape just so that I don't start working again. I'm going to go over to layers. And if I come back in and I turn on these two, turn off my concept layer, it's now masked using the pen tool. So what I'm going to do now, and this is still vector, I'm going to create a new solid color fill layer. Oh, and I did it within my group. So I'm just going to set it real quick to something so I can move it out of that group, put it behind. So now you can see the actual vector mask. Double click the thumbnail so I can set it to something that's a little bit more pleasing. To fill in this Pokeball, and I actually can come back in to my folder here, and I can move the Pikachu around so that you don't see just like the tip of the tail or something. And then I can actually move the Pokeball around as well. But to have it extend that white a little bit further, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create like a new shape. It doesn't really matter, but with it within that Pokeball. I'm going to select white just so that it extends out with that lightning bolt. And I'm just going to call it extension. So that kind of really run down. I've made my Pikachu poster. If you are interested in kind of having that grunge effect, what you do is you can go into Google Images. I'm going to type in distressed paper. Make sure you go to Tools, Usage Rights, Labeled for Reuse. You can even do Labeled with Reuse for modification. And then this is where you can find some really cool textures. I'm going to go with this one just because I think it would be nice and loud. I'm going to just save it to my desktop when it wants to. You guys know how my computer is. There it is. I'm going to come back to Photoshop, bring that in. Need to put it on the very, very top. Oops, it's in my folder now. I'm going to rotate it, get it kind of all scaled so it fits my canvas. Then I'm going to apply a blend mode. You guys are all familiar with those. I kind of stick with multiply. So now you get a distressed paper look. That when you finally say File, Save As, Pika Poster is what I'm calling this. Save it as a JPEG. And then as for screenshotting the layers, I'm going to try to make my layers panel as big as possible. Or not. It's kind of letting me, but I'm going to open up some folders. And make sure that I grab where you can see that I can see that these are shape layers. So my final poster is right here, saved out as a JPEG.